Ilara Voss had learned, very early in life, that the safest thing a person could do was take up as little space as possible. She kept her eyes down, she kept her voice low, she kept her sleeves pulled to her wrists, always, no matter how warm the room was. She moved through the world like someone who was always waiting for a correction, a sharp word, a hard look, a punishment that came without warning and without reason. Tonight was no different. She carried a heavy silver tray through the grand hall of the king's estate, weaving carefully between long tables filled with the most powerful wolves in the territory. The grand summit of packs happened once a year. Every alpha, every luna, every high-ranking wolf from every pack in the land gathered under one roof to discuss law, territory, and alliances. It was the most important event of the year. Ilara was there to collect empty glasses. She did not think about this too deeply. Thinking about it hurt in a way that she had learned not to feed. Alpha Dorian had sent her as part of the serving staff, along with 2 other lower-ranked wolves from Hollow Crest Pack. He had not explained why. He never explained anything to her. She simply did what she was told, wore the gray uniform, and kept her head down. The hall was loud and warm, and filled with important conversations she was not part of. She moved through it carefully, reaching across tables, replacing empty goblets, staying invisible, the way she always stayed invisible. She did not look at the high table at the front of the hall. She did not look at the king. But King Caden Ashford looked at her. It happened the moment she stepped through the side entrance of the hall. A feeling moved through him that was unlike anything he had ever experienced, sudden and total, like the ground had shifted beneath his feet. His hand closed around the arm of his throne without thinking. His eyes found her immediately, the way eyes find light in a dark room, without searching, without choosing. His younger brother in Beta, Theo, noticed within seconds. He leaned slightly to his left. "Brother," Theo said quietly. Caden did not respond. He was watching the girl in gray move through the crowd. She was small. She kept her eyes down. She moved like someone who had spent years learning to disappear. He watched her reach across a table to collect 2 glasses. The movement caused her sleeve to slide. Just a little. Just enough. He saw the scars. They were old and layered, the kind that did not come from a single accident or a single moment. They were the kind of scars that told a story, and it was not a story that ended well for the people who had caused them. Something happened inside Caden in that moment that he could not fully name. He was not a man who felt things loudly. He had learned to govern his emotions the way he governed his kingdom, with control, with precision, with very little room for disorder. He had not felt anything deeply or suddenly in many years. But this was different. He picked up his goblet. He took a slow, steady sip. He said to Theo, very quietly, without moving his eyes from the girl across the room, "Find out who she belongs to." Theo turned to look at him. The tone in his brother's voice made something tighten in his chest. It was not anger. It was something far more controlled than anger. He had heard that voice only twice before in his life, and both times, something had been permanently changed afterward. "Of course," Theo said carefully, and excused himself from the table. Later that evening, after the hall had emptied and the alphas had gone to their private rooms, Ilara was collecting linens from a corridor near the east wing. She was tired, her feet ached. She was thinking about nothing except finishing the task and finding somewhere quiet to sit, when she turned a corner and nearly walked directly into someone. She stumbled back, her hands went out, the linens scattered. She dropped to one knee out of pure habit, head bowed, words already leaving her mouth. "I'm so sorry. I wasn't watching. I apologize. Stand up." The voice was calm, not unkind. She looked up slowly. The man standing in front of her was tall, broad-shouldered, and watching her with dark eyes that were very still and very serious. He wore no crown tonight, no formal robes, but he did not need them. There was something in the way he stood, in the way he occupied space, that made it immediately and absolutely clear who he was. Ilara's heart stopped. She got to her feet quickly, stepping back, her hands twisting together in front of her. "Your Majesty, I'm sorry. I didn't see." "You apologized already," he said. "You don't need to do it again." She went quiet. He studied her face for a moment. Then he said, simply, "What is your name?" "Ilara," she whispered. "Ilara Voss." I'm with the serving staff. From Hollow Crest Pack. She stopped talking, because something happened to her in that moment that she had no words for, and no preparation for. It was like a door opening inside her chest, warm and wide and overwhelming. Her wolf, the part of herself she had spent years pushing down and silencing because it was easier and safer than letting it be seen, surged forward with a recognition so deep and so certain that tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. She did not understand it. She did not understand why she was standing in a corridor, looking at a king she had never met, feeling like she had been looking for him her entire life. Kaidan watched her face move through every part of it, the confusion, the recognition, the fear that followed both. He reached out slowly, giving her every opportunity to step back. When she did not, he gently pushed her sleeve upward, just slightly, just enough, and looked at the scars on her wrist. He did not look away. He did not change his expression. He looked at them the way someone looks at evidence, carefully, completely, without flinching. Then he pulled the sleeve back down. He offered her his hand. "You will sit at my table for the rest of this summit," he said, "as my guest." She stared at his hand, then at him. "I can't," she said. "Alpha Dorian will—" "Dorian Voss," Kaidan repeated. He said the name slowly, the way someone says something they are committing to memory. "Yes," Ilara said quietly. "He's my alpha, my uncle." Kaidan was quiet for one moment. Then he simply waited, his hand still extended, until she placed hers in it. The following morning changed everything, though most people in the hall did not understand what they were seeing. Ilara sat at the king's right side, dressed in simple but clean clothes that his household staff had provided overnight. She sat straight because she was nervous, not because she was comfortable. She was aware of every eye in the room, but none more than Alpha Dorian's. She could feel his stare from across the hall, like a hand pressing down on the back of her neck. Kaidan ran the summit exactly as he always did. He was sharp and fair, and entirely in control. He resolved a border dispute between two southern packs in under an hour. He adjusted taxation agreements without raising his voice once. He was, by every visible measure, completely calm. Theo sat 2 seats away and watched his brother with the focus of someone waiting for a storm. It came quietly. After the morning session, Kaidan stepped away from the hall and sent for his head counsel. The request he made was simple and very specific. He wanted a full record of the Hollow Crest Pack going back 12 years. Every complaint, every report, every wolf who had ever left the pack or been removed from it, every healer's record that could be found. He said it pleasantly. He said it without urgency. His counsel left the room in a hurry. That same afternoon, Kaidan informed Alpha Dorian formally that Ilara would be remaining at the king's estate for an indefinite period for administrative purposes. He said it in a public setting, in front of 3 other alphas, which meant that Dorian could not question it without questioning the king directly. Dorian smiled. He thanked His Majesty for the honor. He left the summit 2 days early. The weeks that followed were not easy for Ilara, but they were different from anything she had ever known. She had been given her own rooms, real rooms, with a window that faced the forest, and a fire that was kept going without her asking. The staff who served her were warm and professional. No one asked her to work. No one placed tasks in front of her without her agreement. No one raised their voice. She did not know how to exist in this. She cleaned things that did not need cleaning. She apologized for being in rooms she had every right to be in. She kept waiting for the condition, for the moment Kaidan told her what this was really about, and what she was expected to give in return. The condition never came. One evening, she asked him directly. They were sitting in his private library, which she had begun spending time in, because it was the quietest room in the estate, and she had learned that Kaidan often worked there in the evenings, and never made her feel like she was in his way. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. He looked up from his papers. "Because you are my true mate," he said. There was no drama in the way he said it. He said it the way a person states something they are completely certain of. "And because someone hurt you, and I am going to make sure that never happens again." She sat with that for a moment. "What if I'm not ready for the first part?" she asked. "Then I will focus entirely on the second part," he said, "for as long as necessary." She cried that night, alone in her room. Not from sadness, from something she did not have a name for yet. A feeling that arrived when you have spent your whole life bracing, and something finally tells you that you do not have to anymore. Slowly, she began to breathe differently. Her wolf came back to her, not all at once, but in pieces, the way trust comes back when it has been badly broken. One morning, Kayden opened the back gate of his private forest and told her it was hers to use whenever she wanted. She shifted for the first time in years without fear following the moment. She ran until she had no more running left in her, and when she returned to human form and lay in the grass completely out of breath, she was laughing. Kayden found her there. He sat beside her in the grass without saying anything, watching her laugh, and his expression was one that Theo, had he seen it, would not have recognized on his brother's face at all. 6 weeks after the summit, the file on Hollow Crest Pack arrived. Kayden read it alone in his study. It took most of the night. By the time he closed it, the fire had gone to ash, and the room was cold. He had not moved in hours. The file was worse than he had expected, and he had expected it to be bad. There were reports from neighboring packs who had raised concerns over the years and been politely dismissed. There was testimony from wolves who had left Hollow Crest and never returned, speaking about what daily life inside the pack had actually looked like. There was a record of a healer who had been removed from her position after expressing concern about injuries on a young female pack member. There was a pattern, long and deliberate and carefully maintained, and at the center of all of it, again and again, was a name: Ilara. Kayden set the file on his desk. He sat in the cold and the dark, and he was completely still for a long time. Then he called for Theo. Theo arrived to find the room unlit, and his brother sitting without expression in a chair by the dead fire, the closed file resting on his knee. "How quickly," Kayden said, without greeting. "Can you move enforcers to the Hollow Crest border without Dorian knowing they are there?" Theo was quiet for a moment. 72 hours, he said. "Do it," Kayden said. Alpha Dorian received the king's letter on a gray morning 10 days later. It was delivered by a single messenger, sealed with the royal crest, and was 4 sentences long. It told him that the king had reviewed the administrative record of the Hollow Crest Pack in full. It told him that a formal tribunal had been opened under pack law, specifically the article that governed the mistreatment of pack members and the deliberate interference with a wolf's natural development. It told him that he, his wife, and 3 named senior pack members were required at the king's estate within 14 days. The last sentence read, "You will come, or I will come to you, and I will bring the full weight of the law with me." Dorian did not sleep that night. The tribunal was open, and that was a deliberate choice. Every alpha in the territory received notice. Most of them came. A king's tribunal was rare, and word had moved quietly through the packs, the way serious things always move, that the girl at the center of it had been found serving at the king's own summit, in a gray uniform, with old scars on her wrists. Ilara sat beside Kayden at the high table, not behind him, not in a corner, beside him, in a chair that had been placed there by the household staff without anyone needing to ask. When Dorian walked into the hall and saw her there, calm, unhidden, present, every bit of color left his face. The tribunal lasted 2 days. Former Hollow Crest wolves came forward one by one. The dismissed healer, whom Kayden's council had found and brought in at the king's personal expense, gave her account quietly and clearly. Written statements were read aloud from wolves who were too far away or too afraid to appear in person. Dorian denied everything. His wife wept in a way that convinced no one. Their senior members repeated the same careful, empty explanations until the room grew tired of hearing them. Kayden did not raise his voice once. He asked questions rarely, and when he did, they were so direct and so specific that they left no room for anything except the truth. On the second day, he delivered his ruling. The Hollow Crest Pack was dissolved entirely. Its territory returned to the crown. Its members were given the opportunity to apply for placement in other packs as individuals, each case reviewed separately and fairly. Alpha Dorian Voss was permanently stripped of rank. He and his wife were exiled from every pack territory under the king's authority. They would live out their lives in human settlements. They would never hold power over another wolf again. The hall was silent. Kayden let it stay silent for a moment. Then he turned, not to the hall, not to the alphas, but to Alara directly, and said, quietly, "It is done." She did not cry. She did not speak. She simply nodded once, slowly, the way a person nods when something they have carried for a very long time has finally been set down by someone else, someone strong enough to carry it the rest of the way. The months after that were quieter. Alara still flinched sometimes. She still reached for her sleeves out of old habit. There were mornings she woke up already bracing herself for a life that no longer existed. Healing did not happen all at once, and she did not pretend that it did. But she was different. Slowly, genuinely different. She led pack welfare meetings that Kaidan placed her in charge of, because she understood better than almost anyone what it looked like when a pack failed the wolves inside it. She shifted freely. She laughed easily. She sat in rooms without calculating whether she was allowed to be there. One evening she found Kaidan in the study where he had read the file. He was working by lamplight. She sat on the edge of his desk, something she would never have done a year ago, and looked at him for a moment. "You knew that first night," she said, "what you were going to do." "Yes," he said. "You didn't tell me." "You had enough to carry," he said simply. "I did not want to add to it." She looked at him for a long, quiet moment. "I'm ready," she said, "for the first part." He set his papers down. And for the first time since the night of the summit, since the night he had seen a girl in a gray dress and felt the ground shift beneath his feet, Kaidan Ashford smiled.